What I'm about to discuss is a very serious topic. There is blatant racism towards people of color, but more specifically, black people in the doll community. There are disgusting incidents of this publicly available, such as Barbie Orso on Instagram comparing two nude black Barbie dolls to the Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil monkeys, and many instances of collectors being racist towards each other directly on social media. But there's also much more subtle forms of racism at play in the doll community, like companies and individuals that are overcharging for darker-skinned dolls. Due to the fact that I'm as white as a sheet of paper, I decided to do a lot of research for this video and also pulled from the experiences of several people of color in the Bratz community to make this video, and their combined experiences both saddened and horrified me, and so did my research. I was angry before I educated myself, but now that I have, I'm even more upset. In the aftermath of some Bratz fans being outraged over the dark complexions that the Kylie dolls were sporting in the new Bratz celebrity doll collection, I feel that this video is more necessary than ever before, because a lot of people online seem to think that people who are upset about the Kylie dolls are overreacting to them, but I see things very differently. For those of you who don't know, Kylie Jenner is 100% white and not half Armenian like Kim, Khloe, and Kourtney Kardashian, and some people have called the dolls an example of Kylie, once again, publicly blackfishing or darkening her skin tone to look more like a biracial or black woman. These dolls do not look Caucasian to me. These dolls look as dark as someone like Aaliyah, Zendaya, or even Janet Jackson. If you've seen pictures of Kylie without makeup, then you know she's as pale as a ghost in real life. I know to some people, they're just dolls, but something about them doesn't sit right with me. I also know my doll history though, so now that I've done my homework, I know why this is such a sensitive issue for people of color, and I can take a very good guess as to why the Kylie dolls are so offensive to some Bratz fans, mainly black people. To be blunt, there's a lot of layers to the racism in the doll community, and the origins of black dolls in America is, unfortunately, heavily rooted in slavery and racism. The history of black dolls in America begins sometime in 1850 with handmade dolls, often made by enslaved men and women. Up until the 1950s, there were no commercially available darker-skinned dolls, so black girls and boys, and black men and women, only dreamed of being able to have dolls that looked like them or someone they knew that was black. Despite dolls of color being made available for sale much earlier than the 1950s, the dolls that were being sold in the early 1900s were often crude depictions of black people, and subsequently were undesirable products to black audiences. The dolls that actually looked like real black people at the time were usually exclusive collector's items that would have cost a pretty penny. So a lot of black individuals and artisans continued to make their own dolls out of various materials, not out of creativity, but out of necessity. Black dolls were rarely produced in large quantities for over 100 years. So a doll, or in this case, the Kylie Bratz dolls that look like black women but are not black women, is a very offensive concept when you consider that most early depictions of black people in doll form were also an attempt to profit off of the black aesthetic. In simple terms, history is wrongfully repeating itself because Kylie is guilty of using the black aesthetic to make money. And although she's not necessarily doing it in as derogatory of a form as dolls that were being sold in the early 19th century, it's still just as offensive. In the 19th century, however, black dolls had become more than novelty products or collector's items. Gradually, Other American companies followed suit and started making true-to-life black dolls for more affordable prices. 1953 was the first time a black doll was widely commercially available, and for those of you who don't know, her name was Sarah Lee. Sarah the doll was also the first commercially available black baby doll. In 1967, the first black Barbie was created, and her name is Francie. Despite years passing, not very many black dolls were made. For example, the first Cabbage Patch dolls that were black were not made until 1983. Addie Walker, American Girl's first black doll, was released in 1993 and authored by Connie Porter, and of course, other characters such as Sasha, Nevra, Felicia, and many other characters from different franchises did not make their public debuts until the 2000s. This is very upsetting to think about because people before 1950 that wanted black dolls could not, in most cases, afford to have them. And this is still an issue for some black people who collect dolls today. We have come a long way since the 1950s in some aspects of life, but the modern day obsession with darker-skinned dolls is out of control in some doll communities. I'm a Bratz girl though, so I'm going to mainly be speaking on what I've observed in the Bratz community. My biggest problem is that Felicia is still being scalped. Now that Felicia has a reproduction doll and is featured in the miniseries and in the latest Bratz video games, this obsession to have Felicia dolls has grown even stronger because Felicia is technically the 8th main character now, and people want even more Felicia dolls because of this. Supply of previously produced Felicia dolls is high, and so is demand, but these dolls are not being sold because the prices for the original Campfire Felicia, the Big Babies Felicia doll, Holiday Felicia, Moalola Felicia, and Sweet Dreams Felicia dolls are still unnecessarily high on the secondhand market. A lot of people collecting Bratz nowadays had never even heard of Felicia in the 2000s, so for most people, there's no nostalgic attachment to her as a doll. I personally like both the Campfire and Sweet Dreams lines, but I like every single doll, not just Felicia, but some people only want Felicia, and that's a problem to me because Felicia and Sasha are not the only black Bratz dolls, but they're the only ones who regularly sell for hundreds of dollars. This is not a problem exclusive to dolls like Sasha and Felicia though, because this exact thing happens to every other dark-skinned doll too, and dolls with darker complexions are regularly overpriced. It is an issue in almost every doll community I can think of except one. The only exception I can think of off of the top of my head right now would be Claudina from Monster High. Every other community has sellers in it who price darker skinned dolls higher than the rest of the dolls they have for sale. I'm not saying you can't collect or sell dolls of color if you're not a person of color, but in the Bratz community, some Sasha dolls, Nevra dolls, and Felicia dolls have become a trophy for some people, and that makes me really uncomfortable. While we're on the topic, I also think it's kind of sad that a lot of people's Grail doll lists have so many Sasha dolls on them, not because she's rare, but because she's hard to find for a fair price. No matter what race you may be, you cannot escape the effects of racism in this community. Due to this, I feel that it's necessary to say that I think Bratz collectors should try their best to be sensitive towards the struggles of other collectors, and they can do that by not showing off or bragging about the darker-skinned dolls in their collections. You can be happy to have them, but don't flaunt them, okay? Good. Glad we had that talk. Anyways, on a much more serious note, despite public outcry for change, dolls with darker complexions are still being sold for astronomically high prices, and in my opinion, some resellers are using Rarity to mask racism, such as in the case of Playline Sasha dolls being sold for hundreds of dollars more than the other dolls from the same lines. You could, for example, buy all of the Genie Magic Bratz dolls or all of the Rock Angels dolls secondhand for far less than the cost of one Genie Magic or Rock Angel Sasha doll. I understand that Sasha is one of the main characters of the franchise, but what is the reason for expensive POC Bratz dolls? Unfortunately, I answered that question for myself. Jade and Sasha, despite being main characters, were produced in doll form far less often than Chloe and Yasmin were, but when Sasha was included in doll lines, just as many Sasha dolls were manufactured as other characters. The only exception to this is Campfire Felicia, but Campfire Dana was also manufactured in smaller quantities. Anecdotal evidence suggests that some stores did not carry Sasha, Nevra, and Felicia dolls as often or at all, but that would be the fault of the person ordering stock for the store and not MGA Entertainment. If store employees chose to stock less Sasha dolls or Felicia dolls or never stocked them, it is likely because they didn't think these dolls would sell as well as other dolls in the line, but assumptions like that are also rooted in racist ideas. Why would a doll like Felicia or Sasha be less desirable or sell poorly in comparison to other dolls from the same lines? It's because she's a dark-skinned doll. People know this about Bratz dolls from the past and try to use this information as a justification to charge as much as they do for dark-skinned dolls. It's a disgusting practice that happens every single day. The colorism was strong in the 2000s, and there still is colorism lingering in the doll community and in other facets of life, not just online, but in real life. But it's also occurring at large retail stores as well. For example, Walmart recently had to apologize about a year ago now for selling black dolls for a higher price than white dolls, and there was a whole bunch of media coverage of that scandal. There was another scandal involving a Hasbro representative who claimed Sasha dolls weren't selling well in Hong Kong during the 2000s, but he was proven by Hasbro to be spreading misinformation. Sasha was allegedly selling just as well as other characters, and Walmart eventually corrected their pricing mistake, but needless to say, individuals who are part of large companies have not always been kind to the people who are part of the Black community, and some stores, to this very day, still don't really carry darker-skinned dolls. Believe it or not, though, collecting Bratz dolls is still a niche hobby, despite their newfound popularity, so it's not a matter of simply being a supply and demand issue. In fact, using the supply and demand argument is, in itself, inherently racist, because there should not be a hypothetical shortage of darker-skinned dolls to collect, at least not according to my research. Also, boiling the struggles of POC collectors down to simply being a matter of supply and demand diminishes their feelings and makes these issues seem far more trivial than they actually are. If you ask me, the reason why darker-skinned dolls are so expensive these days is because resellers have seen how much some people are willing to pay, so they have become a lot more demanding with their prices. It is, rightfully so, stirring up a lot of intense emotions within people, mainly black doll collectors, And some non-POC people with multiple Felicia dolls have even been asked to sell their extra dolls to black collectors, or have been publicly shamed for having too many black dolls in their collections. A lot of POC people right now are very angry with the overall state of the doll community, and I can't necessarily blame them. The Bratz aesthetic as a whole, after all, rests upon the shoulders of the black community, and the dolls are regularly described by the media as more urban than Barbie dolls. So if I was a POC person being excluded from a community that brags about inclusivity and diversity, I'd be pissed off too. However, if you really want to direct your anger towards a particular group of people or person in this community, then I suggest hating resellers, not other collectors. But hate is not healthy to hold on to or to project onto other people. But with that being said, I understand the frustration from both sides. Being told that you shouldn't have dolls of color is not fair, but what's happening to people of color who collect Bratz dolls and dolls from other franchises is also not fair either. Thank goodness for reproduction Bratz dolls, because I firmly believe that everyone who wants a POC Bratz doll should be able to have a POC Bratz doll, particularly if it's because they want a doll because it looks like them. I have an affinity for Megan, as most of you know, simply because she looks the most like me out of all of the Bratz characters. So I know what it's like to seek representation in doll form, and I also know a lot of collectors see themselves in characters like Nevra, Sasha, Basketball Dylan, the regular variant of Dylan, Kiana, and Felicia, and these people deserve to have these dolls. But with that said, nobody deserves a Bratz doll more than someone else, irregardless of their race. We all deserve access to affordable dolls. I deeply sympathize with people of color who are doll collectors. It's tough to find darker skinned dolls that aren't vintage or based on historical depictions of men and women from earlier time periods, or celebrity dolls, or dolls that are toddlers or babies. That much I know for a fact. But the doll industry is trying to be more inclusive nowadays. Brands like Barbie, Rainbow High, and LOL OMG are good examples of diversity for fair prices. Regardless, the racist actions tarnishing this community must feel incredibly alienating, and I don't think anyone, regardless of their race, should have to pay hundreds of dollars for darker skinned dolls like Sasha or Felicia. But I will say that eBay is definitely not the place to find cheap Bratz dolls, period. If you want to find Sasha dolls or Felicia dolls, you should look on Mercari, Poshmark, Vinted, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and other second-hand selling websites. People on eBay are overcharging for Bratz dolls regardless of the skin tone of the doll, and are keeping a lot of Bratz dolls behind a ridiculous paywall. This, of course, affects everyone, not just people of color, but it particularly stings when it does affect people of color. I also mention eBay because a lot of people tend to reference eBay when discussing their frustration towards overcharging for darker skinned dolls in the doll community. That does not in any way whatsoever make their argument less valid. I'm just trying to propose an alternative to collectors struggling to find dark-skinned dolls for their collections at fair prices. Thankfully, it's still possible to find darker-skinned dolls for good prices, at least for now. Hopefully the resellers don't snatch them all. Anyways, with that being said, I will never ever claim to understand that I know what it's like to be a person of color. but I am deeply offended by the new Kylie Bratz dolls and the misrepresentation of the true rarity of modern dark-skinned dolls like Felicia and Sasha and characters from other franchises for that matter. I guess if the doll was limited edition or was sold in limited quantities, I kind of understand why they would be expensive, but even then, a lot of dolls that I've mentioned today are definitely not worth hundreds of dollars, which is exactly what I see happening right now. Overpricing darker skinned dolls is not justifiable. You can like these dolls and you can resell these dolls, but blocking people of color from accessing these dolls is not only selfish, it's also racist. I'm tired of the calls for racism to end in this community that are being repeatedly ignored. This problem has persisted in this community for years, and it's quite frankly atrociously unfair to people of color who collect dolls. Collecting dolls should not be hard just because you're a person of color searching for dark-skinned dolls. We all deserve representation, and we deserve to feel welcomed by the doll community regardless of our race. POC collectors, while I'm on the subject, also deserve just as much representation as fair-skinned races receive, because there is no archetypal black person or POC person. Unfortunately, there still aren't that many dark-skinned dolls on the market today, but I'm really hoping we will see even more diversity in skin tones moving forwards, because right now, if you ask me, we are sitting at a level of diversity comparable to the average foundation line, and I want to see Fenty Beauty levels of inclusivity. There are a lot of different shades of black and brown people in the world, not just one or two. I'm sorry to rant, but I stand in solidarity with POC doll collectors because I know from firsthand experience that the community can be and has been unnecessarily cruel to POC individuals. I made this video today because I've noticed that a lot of fellow non-POC people in this community have largely failed to understand the struggle of POC people in this community, not just when it comes to more recent issues like the Kylie dolls, but for years now. People of color have loudly voiced their dissatisfaction, and the community has remained largely unchanged as a result of the ignorance and racism plaguing our community. I have heard your complaints, and I'm hoping that by making this video, my audience can rest assured knowing that I don't let bad things in this community go unnoticed. Not on my watch. If you made it this far, thank you for watching my video. I sincerely apologize if anything I said today may have been triggering to some individuals, but I think more people should be talking about important topics like this. You matter, and your voices deserve to be heard and respected. I am simply a messenger of truth, hoping to shed some light on the unfair and racist underbelly of the doll community. So I hope you gained something meaningful from watching today's video, because I tried my best to dive deep and open my heart to the struggles of other people in this community. Until next time, bye for now.